Hello, my name is Dr. Ralf Jäger, and it's my pleasure to talk today about carb control for weight management. Being overweight is a complex health issue resulting from a combination of factors such as behavior and genetics. Behaviors can include a lack of regular physical activity and unhealthy eating habits. Being overweight is serious because it is associated with poorer mental health outcomes and reduced quality of life. Being overweight is also associated with the leading causes of death in the United States as well as worldwide, including diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some types of cancer. When it comes to weight loss, there is no lack of fad diets promising fast results. But such diets limit your nutritional intake, can be unhealthy, and tend to fail in the long run. The key to achieving and maintaining a healthy weight isn't about short-term dietary changes. It's about a lifestyle that includes healthy eating, regular physical activity, and balancing the calories you consume and the calories your body uses. In today's lecture, I will critically review the available scientific data on an ingredient that can help us to reduce calorie intake and therefore promote healthy weight loss: white kidney bean extract. Overweight and obesity has become a global health crisis. Worldwide, there are more than 2.3 billion people that are overweight, and overweight is defined by having a body mass index of greater than 25. And the body mass index is a person's weight in kilograms divided by the square of height in meters. There are 2 billion people, 2 billion adults that are overweight, 207 million adolescents, and 131 school-aged children are overweight. Within the adult range, that's 38.9% of the adult population that actually is overweight. But more important actually is the number of school-aged children that are overweight, and that is 20%. The number of overweight and obese people is growing dramatically during the recent years. Childhood obesity is a growing health concern, with obesity rates increasing rapidly in that population. We're looking at the graph and comparing overweight and obese people, and looking at the data from 2000 to 2016. We see that the numbers increase dramatically in adults, but even more importantly in adolescents and children. And this is a global phenomenon that includes South America. If we're looking at the percentage of obese adults in South America, we see that actually Argentina and Chile are leading the way with 28%. The lowest rate we find is in Peru with only 20%, but even 20% obviously is a lot. So obesity is a very serious issue in South America and all over the world. When we're looking at obesity rates among adults in the US and looking at 1997 all the way to 2018, so a 21-year span, we see that the rates of obesity increased from 19.4 to now 31.7%. Every year there's an increase in the obesity rate, and this is so far, there's no end in sight of this trend, so numbers continue to rise. And being overweight or being obese is associated with a lot of different health risks. For once, actually, is associated with your risk of developing arthritis. If you're looking at the graphic, if you are obese, you have a 30% chance of developing arthritis. If you're overweight, the risk is only 20%, and if you're having a healthy weight, it's only 18%. So being obese almost doubles your risk of developing arthritis. And in addition, overweight and obesity is linked to other health risks, including heart disease, stroke, diabetes, cancer, and COPD. So being overweight significantly increases your risk of developing serious conditions. So how do we get here? We're looking at adult obesity prevalence in the United States. If you're looking at 1985, you actually see that we started out not too bad. So the amount of obesity was limited. But then every 5 years, you see there's a significant increase in the number of obese people in all the states and within the United States. And if you're looking at 2019, you can actually see that obesity is widespread all over the country. The coastal areas on the West Coast as well as Florida have the lowest obesity rates, but those rates are still between 25 and 30%, so extremely high. So what is the reason for the increase in overweight and obesity in the population? And there are a lot of different factors, and most important factors include with the caloric intake and then with the caloric expenditure. One example is actually portion sizes. If we're looking at a fast food meal from the 1960s and compare that to the same meal 50 years later, we see that we now get 250% more calories from your French fries, 457 more calories from your burger, and 500% more calories from your beverage. So portion sizes increased, and with the increase in portion sizes, the calorie intakes increased significantly. And on the other hand, our activity level significantly decreased. When we're looking back in the 1960s, there was a lot of hard work that included physical activity. That has been reduced significantly. And also, if you're looking at a modern population, people are looking at their iPhones, they're playing video games. And actually, a lot of children play soccer on a video game rather than being outside and playing soccer. So overall, the activity level has significantly decreased. Another reason why we see the increase in adult obesity is that while we get older, we're starting to lose muscle mass, so-called age-related muscle loss or sarcopenia. This starts usually in our 40s, and then the rate of muscle loss increases the older we get. And as a consequence, we actually have less muscle mass, and the body replaces the muscle that it's losing with fat. If you're looking at the graph on the right side here, this is an example of a person through lifetime, starting 25 all the way to 75. And you can actually see that even if they are maintaining their body weight, the body weight is stable during lifetime, the amount of body fat significantly increases. And that is related to the muscle loss that we experience when we get older, and that is something that everyone goes through. There's always a discussion, what is more important? Is more important our diet and the caloric intake? Or can we overcome, so to say, a bad diet by just exercising more and burning more calories? I mentioned earlier that the amount of physical activity has significantly decreased compared to 50 years ago. But if we're looking now at the last 10 years, we can actually see something positive here, and that actually is that the people that meet the physical activity guidelines has significantly increased, and that actually in all age groups. So there has been a lot of advertising and awareness campaigns to make sure that we all are more active, and that actually works. So people are more active. But if you're looking at the number, if you're looking at a person that is 65 years old now, even with the increased amount, it's only 12.9% of the population that reaches their activity goal. And in the age group of 18 to 24, it's only 30%. So only 1/3 actually reaches their goal of activity. So we're still not moving enough, we're still not exercising enough, and that remains a problem. But looking at this data, basically showing that there's an increase in physical activity, but nevertheless, the amount of obesity and overweight still increases, which indicates that our eating habits are more important when we're looking at why we see the increase in obesity and overweight. During our lifespan, there have been a lot of changes in dietary guidelines, and one of the most important one actually happened in 1979. Back then, we discovered the cholesterol and discovered the link between cholesterol and heart disease. So the general guidelines were changed, that people were asked to eat low-fat diets. And if we're looking at a food, there are basically two major things that influence the taste of a food, and obviously you have to have great tasting food for people to consume it. And those two things that actually deliver the taste is either fat or carbohydrates. So with the instructions of reducing fat, there was a significant increase in carbohydrates. So the carbohydrate intake dramatically increased from that point on. And if you are then matching the amount of carbohydrates that we're consuming with the obesity rates, we can basically see with the introduction of the low-fat guidelines obesity rates started to climb dramatically, clearly linking the amount of carbohydrates that we're consuming with the increase in overweight and obesity. People that actually are overweight or obese are trying to lose weight, which is the good thing, because they're trying to push back and try to get back within the normal range. 45% of overweight and 67% of obese Americans are actively trying to lose weight. However, losing weight isn't that easy. People start diets and then they basically stop their diets again, because either they don't see the expected benefits as quickly as they would like to see, or they basically just can't stand the diet that they picked because it doesn't fit their lifestyle. 15% of adults actually have used weight loss supplements to enhance the weight loss. So while people actually are on a diet trying to lose weight, 15% add supplements that help them further lose weight while they basically are on a diet. And the reason for that obviously is that they try to enhance the effect of the diet and try to see faster results. And if you see results, it's easier for you to stick to the diet that you have chosen. Overall, if you're trying to lose weight, the general recommendations are to increase your calorie expenditure, meaning you should exercise more, you should go out on walks more, you should just be more physically active. Maybe you park in the back row of the parking lot if you're going to a supermarket and shopping, and just basically add small little steps to increase your overall activity level. And on the other hand, we're trying to reduce calorie intake. And we usually do that by trying to eliminate certain foods from our diet. Very popular are low-fat diets and also low-carbohydrate diets. And the two most common ones are Atkins, which reduces your carbohydrate intake to 20 grams or less, and the keto diet, which basically mainly lives off fat and protein, and you have only 5% of your calorie intake from carbohydrates. So it's a very low carbohydrate diet. So those would be the two that try to manage the carbohydrate intake. So what are carbohydrates? So there are three types of carbohydrates. There's fiber, starch, and sugar. Sugars are simple carbohydrates that can be easily absorbed by the body. Starch are complex carbohydrates that cannot be absorbed unless they're first broken down by digestive enzymes. So they need enzymes to break them down so that the body then can absorb them. Fibers are carbohydrates that the body cannot break down, and they're passed through your body undigested. Those are the so-called prebiotics, and gut health lately has seen an increased amount of interest, and probiotics and prebiotics basically being added to a lot of diets these days. Foods that are considered starchy include grains and starchy vegetables such as potatoes, corn, peas, squash, or sweet potatoes. So how do we break down starch? And actually starch is hydrolyzed by an enzyme called alpha amylase, and it's hydrolyzed into maltose. The process of the breakdown of starch actually starts already in your mouth. We have alpha amylase in your saliva, and 5% of the starch that we are consuming is broken down already by your saliva. The other 95% of starches are broken down by alpha amylase that's produced in the pancreas. Then the maltose actually is broken down in the small intestine, and we are absorbing glucose at the end of the day. So we have starch. Starch needs to be broken down by a digestive enzyme called amylase. Amylase breaks it down, and then we are absorbing the starch as glucose. White kidney beans actually have been shown to have alpha amylase activity, meaning they can reduce the activity of the alpha amylase and thereby preventing the breakdown of starch into the simple sugars. And if you are preventing the breakdown of starch into the simple sugars, they can no longer be absorbed. Therefore, you are consuming less calories. So less calories are absorbed from your diet. Phase 2 is the most common white kidney bean extract. It's water extract. It's standardized for the alpha amylase inhibiting units. It's not a stimulant compared to other weight loss ingredients, and it's grown in the US and processed, non-GMO, and it's vegan and vegetarian suitable. Phase 2 actually is available in Satial supplements. It's available in tablets, in sprinkled powders, in vegetable capsules, and direct consumption from a single dose sprinkle. So you can actually take the phase 2 supplement and sprinkle it directly over your food that you're going to eat. Obviously, phase 2 activity is important to monitor if you are actually incorporating it directly into your food and then process the food. And phase 2 shows a great stability when actually added to a food process, for example, white bread, mashed potatoes, orange flavored drinks, and pasteurized milk. Most of the alpha amylase inhibitory abilities are maintained even during food processing, from 93% in mashed potatoes up to 58% in a drink. So let's take some time and look at the most important things, the clinical studies. Because the theory is good, it reduces caloric intake by preventing the breakdown of starch, but now we have to actually show that in a human clinical study. And the first study that you need to do is basically looking at the overall principle, the mechanism of action for potential weight loss. This study actually looked at 1,500 milligrams of phase 2 and looked at basically, can you reduce the glucose uptake from white bread? And the study basically, the subjects consumed 4 largest of sliced white bread in combination with margarine. And the outcome of the study was very convincing, because what you see here is that if you're adding phase 2 to your starchy food, in this case white bread, the majority of the carbohydrates in the bread are not absorbed. So we're not absorbing the carbohydrates because there's no increase in glucose levels in the blood. So therefore, we're not absorbing it, therefore less calories, therefore this in theory should result in weight loss. So let's look at clinical studies that then did the second step, looking at weight loss in controlled clinical settings. When we'll look at weight loss, there are a couple of things we have to consider in the beginning. There are different designs that we can do. On one hand, we have to obviously monitor the calorie intake of those subjects, making sure that they don't change calorie intake during the study if we let them eat whatever they want to. So one kind of design is let the subjects eat what they ate before, do not limit their food intake. The second principal design would be to reduce calorie intake. And you can either do that by basically just reducing it by a set amount. For example, everyone has to reduce calorie intake by 500 calories. You can actually provide them meals that are calorie deficient, so you limit the daily intake of calories, for example, to 1,800 calories a day, and that's all they can eat. Or you basically look at each individual, calculate their calorie intake, the average calorie intake, and then reduce that by a certain percentage, for example, reducing calorie by 20%, but on an individual basis. So those are the two principal ways how we can design a study. Either let them eat whatever they want to, or you're limiting the calorie intake. And the first couple of studies I would like to show you actually worked on the first principle, meaning that the subjects were allowed to eat normally. There's no changes in their diet, and there is no exercise during the study. This first study was done in 2003, looked at males and females that are overweight and slightly obese, so BMI from 24 to 32, with an average age in the mid-30s. Phase 2 was given at 1,000 milligrams with the 3 meals, so a total of 3,000 milligrams a day, and was administered in form of soft chews. Subjects actually went through supplementation for a total of 12 weeks. What you can see here on the graph is the outcome of the study. So we see that phase 2 significantly reduced weight in those subjects, roughly 1 kilo after 6 weeks, roughly 2 kilos after 8 weeks, and 3 kilos after 12 weeks, where the weight in the placebo group remained stable. And it remains stable because, again, we don't change their diet. Since we didn't change that, basically their weight should remain basically stable. So this study shows that if you're adding phase 2 with the 3 meals, you can significantly reduce body weight. The second study that I wanted to show you is the same design. So subjects were allowed to eat as much as they wanted to. There is no calorie restriction and there is no added exercise in the study either. The difference between this study and the previous one is that people were slightly heavier. So the study was done in an obese population, not an overweight population. And the dosing was different. The first study was 3 times a day with meals of 1,000 milligrams. This study actually used 1,500 milligrams twice a day. So before lunch and before dinner. And also shorter duration, only 8 weeks instead of 12. And if you look in the data, you again see that the addition of phase 2 reduced body weight, in this case roughly 2 kilos after 8 weeks. And if you're looking at the previous study, it was around 2.18 kilos. This one is 1.7 kilos. So it's a similar weight loss that we see here. However, in this study, the weight loss is slightly less than we saw in the previous study. That basically tells us that we, instead of supplementing 3 times a day, we can supplement twice a day and the product is still effective. But looking at the data, it looks like supplementing 3 times a day is slightly more effective than actually having only the product twice a day. This is another study, again, looking at eating, no calorie restriction. And this study was done actually in China, so the Chinese female and male subjects, slightly older, so they're in the later phase of their 30s. And same thing, they basically supplemented 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day, 50 minutes before the meals. Phase 2 was administered in form of capsules. And what we see here again is a significant reduction in body weight. So people lost 2 kilograms after the 60-day study period. And in addition to losing weight, you can actually see a difference in body shaping. So waist circumference, phase 2, they lost about 2 centimeters around their waist and compared to less reduction within the placebo group. So there's a significant loss of weight and a significant improvement in body shaping in this study looking at a Chinese population. Now let's take a look at the other side. Basically, now we're introducing calorie restriction in addition to supplementing with phase 2. This study actually was done in Europe now, in Germany. Subjects are a little older than the ones we looked at before, so those are in their mid-40s on average. And subjects actually were asked to reduce calorie intake by 500 calories. So the average calorie intake in the study was 2,300 calories per day. The outcome of the study is that you see a significant reduction in weight, 3 kilos in the study after 12 weeks. And very importantly is that you also see a significant reduction in fat. So if you're putting someone on a calorie restricted diet, people lose weight, but they lose muscle mass as well as fat. So when we're putting someone on a diet, we were hoping for that they mainly lose fat and not muscle, where they're actually on a calorie restricted diet. Calorie restriction actually increases muscle protein breakdown. So if you're increasing muscle protein breakdown, you tend to lose muscle mass. So that's the reason why we're not only losing fat, but also muscle at the same time. So therefore, out of the 2.97 kilograms of total weight loss, 2.23 was fat. So the majority of the weight loss that we're seeing in this study actually is fat loss, and that's exactly what we hope for. The study also actually contained a follow-up period, so another 12 weeks of supplementation, but without the calorie restriction. And people in the phase 2 group were actually able to maintain their weight loss, and 73.6% actually maintained their weight loss. So roughly 3/4 of the subjects that lost weight during the calorie restriction were able to maintain that weight loss after they stopped the calorie restriction. Also important, obviously, is if you are on a calorie-restricted diet, that actually has different effects on your body, mainly on mood. And the study actually looked at food cravings. And basically, the outcome of the study is that during the calorie restriction and you're adding phase 2 to your diet, you see a reduced desire for sweet foods, decreased frequency and strength of food cravings, and things like that. So phase 2 during a calorie restricted diet helps you to stick to the diet because you have less of the cravings that you usually have, and the cravings usually make you break your diet. So therefore it helps you to stick to a calorie restricted diet. So there's an additional benefit of adding phase 2 to a calorie restricted diet by managing all those food cravings. This is an example of a calorie restricted diet and exercise. Calorie restriction was done by giving subjects an upper limit, only 1800 calories per day. The study was done in overweight females and males again. Supplementation was 1,000 milligrams at the beginning of breakfast and lunch for 4 weeks. So it's a lower dose, it's only 2,000 milligrams a day, it's only 2 meals, breakfast and lunch. And we're having a calorie restriction and exercise. The outcome of the study is that overall the weight loss in the phase group is greater than in the control group. But we're then looking at the people that had basically divide the groups by carbohydrate intake. We see that people that consumed more carbohydrates in their diet have a significantly greater weight loss. So obviously phase 2 works by influencing starch absorption. So people that have more starch and more carbohydrates in their diet see a greater benefit of phase 2 supplementation. So this subgroup actually lost 3.89 kilograms of body weight, so significantly greater than the control group. And also we're looking at the body shaping effect. We see that phase 2 in the people that actually consumed greater amounts of carbohydrates saw a significant greater improvement of waist circumference, or a significant reduction in that area. So the learning from this study is that obviously the more starchy food you eat, the better phase 2 works, as expected. Recently, there was a meta-analysis looking at phase 2 studies only. There's a total of 11 clinical studies that were analyzed during these meta-analyses. A total of 573 subjects from 11 studies were analyzed, and the outcome of the meta-analysis is that phase 2 significantly reduces body weight. There were 3 studies out of the 11 that looked at the body fat, and the meta-analysis actually concluded that the phase 2 significantly reduces body fat. What we like to see, obviously, is that an ingredient is studied in different populations, and the studies actually used in this meta-analysis were from Asia, from Japan and China, from Europe, from Germany, Italy, and Norway, from North America, and also from Latin America. The doses that were used in the different studies ranged between 2,000 and 3,000 milligrams per day. The duration, so how long they took the supplement, was between 4 and 12 weeks. And very important to mention actually is that there was a previous meta-analysis looking at the effects of white kidney bean extracts. The previous meta-analysis found significant weight loss, but did not find any significant fat loss. This meta-analysis only looking at phase 2 studies, so not any other white kidney bean extracts. Looking at only phase 2, you see significant increase in weight loss, but also in fat loss, indicating that phase 2 might have a different mechanism, a more effective mechanism of action compared to the other available generic white kidney bean extracts. The last human study I wanted to show you actually is a yet unpublished study. So the study has been completed, but it's not yet published. The study was done in Europe again, in Germany. The mean age of subjects were in their late 40s, so 48 was the average age. The study contained two different doses of phase 2. It's either 1,000 milligrams or 700 milligrams taken 3 times a day for a total of 12 weeks. The study is a calorie restriction study, so subjects were asked to reduce calorie intake by 20%. What the outcome of the study is that in regards to weight loss, we see that phase 2 high as well as low dose resulted in significant weight loss at the end of the study. There seems to be a dose-dependent effect. It looks like 3,000 milligrams per day is more effective than 2,100 milligrams of phase 2 per day. So the lower dose is significant and works, but the higher dose actually shows a greater effect, so there seems to be a dose-dependent effect. 92% of the high-dose phase 2 group lost at least 3% of body weight, and 70% in the low dose, so again indicating that there is a dose-dependent effect. But 92% of all subjects that were in the study losing weight is a very impressive amount. In addition, we saw a significant loss of body fat. Again, the reason why we're really interested in that is that we want to make sure that the majority of the weight loss that we're seeing actually is fat and not muscle mass. So 3.2 kilograms was the loss of body fat out of the 4.48 kilograms of total loss of body weight. So the majority of the weight that was lost actually is fat, which is exactly what we want to see. In addition, there's also a beneficial effect on body shaping. So subjects on average lost around 3 centimeters on their waist, which is important because that is something, obviously you can put yourself on a scale and see the changes in weight. But if you can see a change in weight also in the clothes that you're wearing, that keeps people motivated and sticking to the diet. So the latest study on phase 2 showed very significant results, very interesting results, because it shows that if you're taking it might be more effective. So the standard dose of 3,000 milligrams, taking less is still effective. So you still see a benefit of phase 2 supplementation. So overall, very good study, very great results. Other than humans, we actually see also a significant increase in overweight and obesity in our companion animals. Since we tend to feed our animals similar patterns than actually we do, actually there's a significant increase in obesity rates in companion animals, specifically in dogs. This is the outcome of a pilot study, and basically the owner of the dogs were asked not to change the dog's diet, not change their exercise routine. They used phase 2 and sprinkled it over the food for just 1 week. And within the 1 week, they saw a loss of a body weight of 3.6%. So 1.2 kilogram in the study. That is 3.6% of the body weight. And in addition, there's also a body shaping, so they lost abdominal girth, the animals. And this study shows that if you're using phase 2 and you have an animal that actually is in need of losing some weight, phase 2 seems to be a very effective way of reducing body weight in companion animals, in this case dogs. And the study actually was done in outpatient veterinary clinics on Hawaii in a broad variety of different dog breeds. So in summary, so phase 2 is a carb controller that is a water extract of white kidney beans that helps to reduce the breakdown of dietary starch into simple sugars by inhibiting the alpha amylase activity. So it's reducing the activity of the enzyme that breaks down starch. If you're reducing the breakdown of starch, you are reducing the calorie uptake. And if you are consuming less calories, you can actually see a significant loss of weight and of body fat. So it's a very clear mechanism of action, reducing the activity of the enzyme that breaks down starch. As a consequence, you are consuming less calories. And if you are having less calories, there's a direct connection to losing weight and losing body fat. Phase 2 can be taken before or with a meal with the carbohydrates. Most clinical studies actually do that 3 times per day, but it also works if you're just taking 2 main meals. And phase 2, compared to other weight loss ingredients that are out there, it's not a stimulant. And actually, it's used from beans that are grown in the United States and processed. It's non-GMO and it's vegan and vegetarian suitable. Special thanks to Framingham Farmer for sponsoring today's talk. And it was a pleasure discussing the effects of white kidney bean extracts on weight with you. And I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.